Good morning. Welcome to Truth for Today. This is Daiqing Yuan, your host and teacher, pastor of Abilene Bible Church. Today we're continuing our study of the 5 pillars of Matthew, and this is lesson 5.9, the standard of judging the servants. The text is Matthew 25:14 through 30. We are in a big project of studying eschatology through the comparative study of 3 books, Daniel, the 5 pillars of Matthew, and Revelation. In Daniel, it told us that the visible kingdom of God, which is Israel, had fallen, but it was promised a restoration. And in the 5 pillars of Matthew, that's the 5 long discourses of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gave us the design, the presentation, the stages, and the key of the spiritual kingdom. And finally, in the number 5 of the pillars or the discourses, it gives the transition from the spiritual kingdom to the full kingdom. And the full kingdom will come in Revelation as the millennium. But before that, there shall be a church age, rapture, tribulation, and second coming. Okay, now overall, the kingdom of God is like this. It has 4 stages. Before Christ, or in the Old Testament, the kingdom of God is basically physical, which has 2 stages. One is fuzzy or is visible. The fuzzy kingdom was from creation to Abraham. It was physical and unclear. The visible kingdom is from Abraham to Christ. It was physical and clear. And all of them has a pattern of the people of God having an increasing power, then fallen, then a restoration, then the stage is lifted up. And after Christ is a spiritual kingdom, but right now it's invisible, it's in the heart, so it is the church age. And then after the second coming of Christ, it will be the full kingdom, when the kingdom will be spiritual and visible. Okay, now the pattern of history in Old Testament Israel is a rise and fall. Their fall is when Judah was taken to Babylon, and they were without land for 70 years, without temple for 70 years. Okay, Israel and Judah each had its time. Israel's fall had 390 years with a gap. When it's under David and Solomon, Judah had 490 years with a gap under David and Solomon. And that's the 5 pillars of Matthew. And the pattern of history and prophecy can be united if we see that Israel's fall have 390 years, which matches Israel's rise. And then starting from the time of Gideon, who was the first uncrowned king, and God held him responsible for allowing the religious sin of Israel and the social sin of Judah. The religious sin was making idols. Gideon himself made a golden ephod. But Israel's sin was 490, represented by Ezekiel sleeping on the left side for 390 days, and representing the sins in years for Israel. But there was a gap. So from 1186 minus the gap of Israel's rule under David and Solomon, minus the 73, you get 723 BC, which is exactly the time of the Syrian captivity of Israel. And for Judah, they had 490 years sin because they missed 70 Jubilee years, 70 sabbatical years. Okay, so if you start counting from the time of Gideon, 1186 BC minus 490, then minus the 80 years when it's under David and Solomon, and minus the 11 Jubilees when the sins are not counted, then you get 605, which is exactly the first captivity of Judah. So Judah had 3 captivities and 3 returns. The whole period is called the so-called 70 years of Babylonian captivity. It's the punishment. 70 is a punishment for the crime of the 490. But the restoration is also 490. It's so-called 70 weeks of Daniel. It started counting from the 3rd return under Nehemiah. And 483, this prophetic years expired at the time of Jesus in AD 33. And then there's a gap when Jesus is the king of Israel, but only in heaven and not recognized by Israel, but only by the church. And this gap turned out to be very long, 2,000 plus years. But this gap is equivalent spiritually or symbolically to David and Solomon. For David is, the name means the beloved, and he and his descendants as king of Israel are supposed to be the sons of God, ruling over the nations on behalf of God. And Solomon, the name means Prince of Peace, and he is the son of David. And Jesus is all of the above, the beloved Son of God, Son of David, Prince of Peace. Okay, so God is sovereign, he's powerful, he controls time, and he allows free will and fall and then restoration, acceptance of Christ's love, but time is in his control. History has a pattern that is clearly presented by the Bible, and it is not only precise, but also symmetric, and thus beautiful. So we know the time of Gideon as 1186 BC because we can match all of the time of the judges between the conquest and the United Kingdom. And it fits precisely if you recognize there's one line of early judges and two lines of later judges. They're northern or civil judges and southern but religious judges, because the south at that time was occupied by the Philistines, which lasted all the way until the time of David. Okay, and then Saul had the king of Israel. It didn't recover the southern two tribes, which was led to independence by David. Thus, the kingdom of Judah from the beginning was a different kingdom with Israel. And then there was a united kingdom of Israel and Judah only under David. After 7 years of him ruling over Judah, he became the king of both the north and south. So there was only a 73-year period of united kingdom of Israel and Judah. Then there was the kingdom division. But before then, the north and south were already divided. Okay, now let's look at the Olivet Discourse. It is a layered Q&A. So we can see there was a backdrop talking about how beautiful the temple was, and Jesus said, well, the temple will fall, and every stone will be overturned. And then the disciples asked 3 questions. The 3 questions are, when will these things happen? Which in context means the fall of the temple. And then they asked 2 questions. The first was, when does this begin? Another is, when is the end of the world and your coming? And this order was preserved in the Hebrew Matthew, while in the Greek Matthew it was switched. Okay, but overall that's question 2, A and B. And Jesus answered them in reverse order. First, he answered that when will the end of the world? And he gave us the 6 signs, which matches the 6 seals in Revelation 6. And then he gave us the sign of his coming. That means it's after the 6 seals. The 7th seal in Revelation, it turns out to be 7 trumpets, and 7th trumpet turned out to be 7 bowls. But after all of that, that's tribulation, then there will be the second coming. Okay, and then he answered the second question. Okay, when does it begin? And he gave us when the fig tree has leaves again, then summer is near. And that's probably talking about the restoration of the state of Israel. Okay, and then he answered the first question last. When will these things happen? Well, in 1 generation. That's his answer. Okay, in other words, in 40 years. From the time of 33, you add 40, you get 73. And 73 minus 7 years of tribulation, 66 was the expected time of the first stage of second coming, rapture of the church. Second stage is 73. And those 7 years are exactly the time of the first Jewish rebellion against Rome. Okay. Now, the reminder is that Jesus said, you cannot know the day or the hour. Okay. Actually, if you know the time of the rapture, you would know the day of the second coming, but you can't now know the hour. But the day of the second coming of the rapture cannot be known. But he didn't say that you cannot know the year. Okay. Now, that is the first half of the Olivet Discourse. The second half of Olivet Discourse are these special addresses, which were special with S, S1A, 1B. They are about the end of the church age, and then it's about the rapture, and it's about the tribulation, and then it's about the second coming. Okay, and about the judgment of the servants of Jesus, which is the Jews, and then about the served, that's the nations. Both will be judged, but the special address 4 is what we're going to deal with today in 25:14 through 40. The question is that, is the judgment of the servants unreasonable? Okay, and then he will answer that with a parable. So here is the structure of the second half of Olivet Discourse. Okay, about the end of the church age, he says it's like Noah's days. About the rapture, well, he says it's like somebody, one is taken, one is left, etc., etc. And then about the tribulation, there are two halves. First half, seemingly peaceful. Second half, very bad. And about the first half, he talking about the key of the preparation. And then he said, basically, it's not going to be easy. And then he mentioned the need of being prepared. And that's the, that is the, I think the virgins with or without oil. Okay, and the standards of judging the servants. Okay, it basically says do not blame God. And then the standard of judging the served. Okay, judging the servants and judging the served. So today we're talking about this, the standard of judging the servants. Okay, or rather the Jews. Okay, and he's saying he is actually just and fair in judging at the time of the second coming. He will judge the Israel with 12 disciples. Okay, and then how would he judge? Is he reasonable? Well, here is his answer. Okay, now the structure of the Olivet Discourse, we already said the first half is a roundabout way of answering 3 questions. The second half are dealing with the structured tribulation, the rapture, tribulation, first half, second half, and the second coming. We're dealing here. The Lord judging the servants is not harsh. Okay. Now, remember, the Hebrew Matthew is valuable in the sense that it preserved a literary marker for the beginning or division of sections. And again, Jesus said to the disciples, it preserved in many places of these sections. Okay, now let's deal with this section. According to the Hebrew Matthew, according to Shem Tov, this is Matthew 25:14 through 17. Again, Jesus told his disciples another example. So that's the literary marker, saying this is the beginning of the new section. Okay. The kingdom of heaven is like a man going to a far journey. He called his servants and dispersed to them his money. To one he gave 5 coins of gold. To the second he gave 2 coins of gold. And to the third 1. To each according to what was suitable for him he gave. Then he went on his journey. The one who received 5 coins of gold went and gained 5 others. Likewise, the one who received 2 went, bought, sold, and gained 5 others. But the one who received the 1, here is 5 others. Okay. But the one received 1, went, dug in the earth, and hid the money up of the Lord. Okay. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey now that's a Greek Matthew. For it's just like a man going about on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. So here he used the slaves. The other side is the servants. Okay. And then here it didn't say the kingdom of heaven is like. Okay. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability. The other says, according to what was suitable. And he went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents. Okay, remember he's talking about the talents. Okay. Talents is a big number. The one who received the 5 talents went and traded with them. So he didn't say buy and sell, but said trade. And gained 5 more talents. The same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gave 2 more, so rather than 5. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, the second stage, awarding the faithful. After many days, the Lord of those servants came and sought from them an accounting of the money. The one who received 5 coins of gold came near and said to him, My Lord, you gave me 5 coins of gold, and behold, for you are 5 others which I have gained. His Lord said to him, Truly you are a good and faithful servant, because you have been faithful in a little, I will appoint you over much. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Also the one who received 2 coins of gold drew near to say, My Lord, you gave me 2 coins of gold, here are 2 others. That's what I think. That's not 5, but 2 others. I think here's 2 others. Let me check with the Bible. Matthew 25, 16, 17. Well, here the text said 5 others, so I guess here it's I think it's a copying error because the other place has 2. All right. Now here it says gain 2 more. Okay, so we can see that this 2 is correct. Okay, and his Lord said to him, Truly you are a good and faithful servant, because you have been faithful in a little, I will appoint you over much. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Okay. So we found a textual problem, but it is correctable. Okay. Now, according to the Greek Matthew, now after a long time the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Also, the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Both are faithful. Both have different abilities, and each have done according to what is given to him. And they're all rewarded. Now, about revealing the lazy. According to Hebrew Matthew, verse 24. Then he who received the 1 drew near and said, My Lord, I know that you are firm and hard, and that you reap what you did not sow and gather what you did not scatter. So in fear of you, I went and hid your coin of gold, and then, behold, you have what is yours. His Lord answered and said, Wicked and lazy servant, since you know that I reap what I did not sow, and gather what I did not scatter, therefore you should have given my wealth to my money changers, so that at my coming I would have received what is mine with profit. And according to the Greek Matthew, and the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man. Okay, here it says firm and hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked, lazy slave. This is the same, wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I cannot scatter no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Okay, basically saying the same thing. Now about punishing the lazy. Verse 28. Therefore, take from him the coin of gold, and give it to the one who gained the 5 coins of gold. To the one who has it, it will be given. But to the one who does not have, that which was intended for him will be taken from him. As for the lazy servant, cast him into the darkness of the lowest places. There shall be for him weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this looks like eternal punishment. According to the Greek Matthew, therefore take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. Okay, the other said 5, but then it became 10. Here it just said at the end 10. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's about being lost forever. Okay. This third servant definitely did not know the character of the master. He thinks that the master is a hard man, bad character, with no mercy, reaps where he did not sow, unreasonable, and then out of fear he just hid the talent. In other words, didn't serve, didn't do his ability according to his ability. Then he was punished. He was thrown away, punished forever, because he actually did not have a personal relationship with the Lord. He didn't trust him. He didn't believe him as a good man. Okay, he hated his master. Thus, he will be separated forever. That's talking about the missing out the salvation. While the first two, even though having different abilities, but they are all rewarded because they all served with their best ability. And then here is Luke's version, okay? And it's similar, but not exactly the same, okay? And it's very interesting. It's given in a different situation. Do we have time to finish this? Probably not. Well, then we will reserve for the next time. We'll go on to analyze the other version. But just look at the two versions, two Matthews, the Greek and Hebrew Matthews. They are basically talking about the same story, but with slight differences. One says a coin of gold. The other says a talent. Okay, a coin of gold is not as much as a talent, which means a lot of money. Okay, and the first two servants are all the good ones, even though they have different abilities. And that we found a textual problem that for the second one, the Hebrew Matthew said he had 2, he gained 5, but later said he gained 2. I think the 5 was a copying error. But in the Greek Matthew, there's no inconsistency. It was smooth and consistent. So we can again confirm that the Hebrew Matthew was probably the original one, but it was preserved with only the Jews, first Jewish believers, then non-believers. So the copies are not as many, and then we have some small copying problem, but they can be corrected. And but it has these literary markers that shows us the beginning of a new section. Like here, again, Jesus told his disciples, another example that tells us the beginning of this new section. And it confirms our literary thematic analysis. And in that sense, it is still valuable. But the spirit is the same. Is God unreasonable in judging his servants? No, he is very reasonable. Okay. See you next time. May God bless his word.